forest had a silence that weighed heavy, broken only by the sound of the man's axe splitting wood. He liked it that way. Silence was safer than people, quieter than the chaos he had left behind years ago. His cabin stood in the heart of the woods, far from roads, far from eyes. It was his. His shelter, his walls, his escape. No one had crossed his doorstep in years, and he intended to keep it that way. But on that cold night, when the sky flickered with strange light like broken lightning, a sound shattered his silence. A knock. It was not a gentle knock, but steady, sharp, deliberate, echoing through the wooden frame of the cabin. He froze, the axe in his hand, sweat suddenly prickling his neck.
Nobody should be here. Nobody even knew he lived this deep in the
forest. He set the axe down slowly and reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. The knock came again, this time softer, like a request. He took a breath, tightened his grip, and opened the door. A woman stood there, and her hair clung to her face, damp from the mist that had rolled in with the storm. Her eyes were dark but calm, almost too calm for someone lost in the woods. She didn't flinch at the sight of the rifle, nor did she ask for permission.
Yes.
She stepped forward, as though the threshold already belonged to her. The man moved instinctively to block her, but her gaze stopped him. It was not hostile, was familiar, uncomfortably so. "You finally opened," she said softly, her voice steady in the cold night. "I've been waiting." He frowned, his throat tight. "You're lost." "No. The road's 10 miles back. This isn't an inn." But she shook her head, a faint smile curling at her lips. Her eyes traveled past him, scanning the cabin's interior like someone who already knew what she would find. She stepped inside without waiting for an answer, her boots tapping against the wooden floor. The man spun, shutting the door with a thud, anger rising. "You can't just walk in here. This is my home." Her head turned slowly, and her words fell like a weight. "Not just yours, it's ours." The room seemed colder. He narrowed his eyes, his voice sharp. "I don't know you." "Yes, you do." She moved toward the table, her fingers brushing across the wood. "You built this. Every beam, every nail. You built it together." She looked at him, her face unreadable. "Even if you don't remember," the man felt a chill crawl up his spine. She spoke with such certainty that it unsettled him more than angered him. He gripped the rifle tighter, his heartbeat loud in his ears. "You're mistaken. I built this cabin with my own hands. No one else." The woman's eyes softened, as if she pitied him. "You tell yourself that, but memories lie. They've taken so much from you." Her words stabbed into him, confusing, maddening. He left the world to escape confusion, to escape lies. The cabin was the one thing he knew was real. His walls. His fire, his silence. Yet the way she moved, the way her hands traced the table and the walls, unsettled him. She touched the wood like someone who had placed it there long ago, like an owner returning home. That night he couldn't sleep. She sat near the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames, saying little. He lay awake in his bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of the forest outside. The woman didn't ask for food, didn't ask for warmth, as though she belonged here naturally. When the fire dimmed, he saw her rise silently. She walked to the far wall, her hand pressing against the wooden boards. He almost called out, but the words caught in his throat when he saw the faint glow that spread where her fingers touched. Lines formed like cracks of pale light. Strange. Symbols shining for only a second before vanishing back into the wood. She turned, catching him staring. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked in a low voice. "The forest pressing in. The cabin isn't just yours. It never was. It's the only place they can't reach us." His chest tightened. "Who's they?" Smiled faintly, though her eyes carried sorrow. "The ones who take what you are. The ones who already took your memory of me." The man sat up in bed, heart pounding, his rifle in his hands, though he didn't remember picking it up. He wanted to throw her out, drag her to the edge of the woods, and tell her never to return. But something deeper, something buried in the hollow spaces of his mind, kept him still. Her words had stirred something, a flicker of recognition, a whisper in the dark corners of his thoughts. The cabin. His cabin, suddenly felt less solid, less his. He stared at her as she stepped away from the wall, her presence both unsettling and strangely familiar. The silence returned, but it no longer felt safe. It felt like a question waiting to be answered, and for the first time in years, the man was not certain that he was alone. The morning came gray and heavy, the forest wrapped in a strange fog that swallowed the trees.
Ow.
The man woke with a tightness in his chest, his rifle still resting against his arm. He didn't remember drifting off, only the firelight, the glowing symbols, and the woman's steady voice whispering about memories stolen. Now she sat at the table as though she had always been there, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of water, calm, unshaken, like she belonged. He rose from his bed, eyes hard, but she smiled faintly. "Sleep well?" "No," she asked, as though the night had been ordinary. "You need to leave," he muttered. His voice cracked with a mix of anger and unease. "This isn't a place for visitors. You found shelter in the storm? Fine. But now it's morning. The road is that way." He pointed toward the trees with sharpness in his tone. But she only shook her head slowly. "You still don't see it." "Do you? This isn't just your cabin. It's mine too." "It has always been ours." His jaw tightened. "Stop saying that." She leaned forward, her eyes steady, unblinking. "Do you know about the scar under your left shoulder blade?" His breath caught. That scar was hidden, deep, a jagged mark he never spoke of, never showed, had gotten it years ago in a fight. He wished to forget. No one knew about it. She continued before he could speak. "You fell. Right here, on this floor. The beam wasn't steady, and when it broke, you cut yourself badly. I stitched it. My hands did." She reached across the table, but he pulled back, his heart pounding in his chest. "How do you know that?" His voice was almost a growl. "Because I was here. Because we built this place together. Every scar on you, every corner of these walls, they carry both of us." Her voice was calm, not pleading, not desperate. It was certainty, and that certainty was worse than lies. The man pushed away from the table, pacing the wooden floor. The cabin creaked under his steps, familiar, yet now strange. He'd always thought of this place as his escape, his sanctuary. But the way she spoke, the way her eyes followed every nail, every shadow, made him feel like a trespasser in his own home. "I don't remember you," he said finally, voice lower now, almost pained. "Not your face, not your voice, nothing." But she nodded. Her expression, gentle, almost sorrowful. "That's because they took it. They reached into you, cut away what mattered, and left you hollow. But the cabin holds the truth. It remembers what you don't." The words scraped against his mind. He wanted to deny it, to laugh at the absurdity. But then, why? Did she know his scar? Why did the walls glow at her touch? Why did the forest feel heavier since she arrived, as though it too was waiting for him to admit something buried? That night, as the fog thickened outside, he heard her move again. She lit no lamp, made no sound, but when he turned in his bed, he saw her tracing the walls once more. This time, he rose and walked closer, silent, until he saw the faint glow. Spread beneath her fingertips, the lines formed symbols, circles, angles, a language he could not read but felt in his bones. "What are you doing?" He whispered sharply. She turned her head slightly, her face calm in the dim light. "Reminding the cabin what it is? Reminding you what you are?" He stepped closer, his hand brushing the symbols. They were warm, pulsing faintly, as though the wood itself was alive. When his skin touched them, images flickered behind his eyes' flashes. A fire, hands covered in dirt, two figures lifting beams side by side. He stumbled back, breath ragged. She caught his gaze. "You saw it, didn't you? Pieces of what was taken. They can't erase everything. Not here." His heart hammered in his chest. He shook his head, forcing the images down.
"Oh, you're
"Planting this in me? You're trying to make me doubt my own mind?" Her expression didn't change. She only said, "Your mind already doubts itself. That's why you came here, why you ran from the world. Deep down, you've always felt the missing pieces, haven't you?" The man didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. He turned. away, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. The forest outside groaned under the wind. And for a moment, he thought he heard something else within the storm whispers. Voices that sounded like his own, calling his name. He closed his eyes, but the sound did not fade. When he opened them, the woman was still watching him, her face unreadable. Her presence both unwanted and impossible to push away, and though every part of him wanted to drive her out, another part, small but stubborn, whispered that if she left, the silence of the cabin would never feel the same again. The fog did not lift the next day. It clung to the forest like a living thing, curling between the trees, swallowing the horizon, making the cabin feel like the last place on earth. The man stepped outside with his axe, the chill of the air heavy. In his lungs, he needed to clear his head, needed to feel the weight of wood and the rhythm of work, anything to push away the woman's words. But the forest did not feel the same. Every tree seemed taller, every shadow deeper, as if the woods were watching him. She followed him out, her boots crunching softly against the damp ground. He wanted to tell her to stay inside, but the words caught in his throat. She moved beside him as though she had walked these trails 1,000 times, her eyes scanning the mist. Sharp and unafraid. "You hear them, don't you?" she asked suddenly. He paused mid-swing, the axe hovering above the block of wood. "Hear who?" "Forest. The ones who whisper. They've been here longer than either of us." Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact, like she was describing something obvious. He scoffed, though unease twisted in his stomach. "It's just the wind. The woods always make noise." But she shook her head, stepping closer to a tree where the bark was split with deep cracks. She pressed her palm against it, and for a moment he swore the lines glowed faintly, the same way the cabin walls had the night before. The air seemed to hum, a low vibration that made his skin crawl. He gripped the axe tighter, his throat dry. "There, trying to remind you," she whispered. "The forest holds the pieces too. That's why you came here, even if you don't remember why." The man stepped back, his voice sharp with denial. "Stop saying that. I came here because I wanted to. Be alone, that's all." But even as he said it, a memory flickered, invited him walking through the woods years ago, carrying more than tools. A hand beside his, smaller, steadier, guiding him through the dark. He blinked hard, forcing the image away. That night, when the fog thickened again, the cabin seemed to breathe. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaked, and faint whispers threaded through the silence. He tried to ignore it, burying himself in work, sharpening tools, tending the fire. But the woman sat calmly in her chair, her gaze fixed on the window, as if waiting for something outside. Finally, he snapped. "What are you looking for out there?" She turned her head slowly, her voice low. "Them." The words sent a chill down his spine. "Them. The ones who took your memory. The ones who never stopped searching. They don't like that you found this place, that we made it ours. That's why they erased me from you. But the forest still remembers. The cabin still remembers. And now." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "They know you're remembering." "Two!" A knock echoed suddenly at the door sharp, deliberate, almost identical to the night she first arrived. His blood ran cold. He froze, staring at the door, rifled instinctively in his hands. The woman didn't move, her expression unreadable. The knock came again, he whispered, almost breathless. "Who's out there?" Her answer was quiet, almost mournful. "Not someone you want to see." His hands shook on the rifle. The cabin felt smaller, the air thicker. He had lived years without a single knock, without a single soul reaching his doorstep. And now there was another. He glanced at her, but she only said, "Don't open it." The knocks grew louder, more urgent. The walls of the cabin seemed to vibrate with each one, dust falling from the beams above. His instincts screamed at him to defend his home, to open the door and face whatever was there. But his chest tightened with fear he couldn't explain. "Why are they here?" he hissed, his voice trembling. "Because you're starting to remember," she whispered. "And they can't allow that." The knocks stopped suddenly, leaving behind a silence even heavier than before. He stood frozen, the rifle clutched so tightly his knuckles were white. For long minutes, nothing moved, nothing breathed, until, finally, the forest outside groaned with the sound of branches breaking. Heavy footsteps fading into the mist. The man lowered the rifle slowly, his heart pounding in his ears. He turned to the woman, his voice breaking. "What do they want from me?" She looked at him with sorrow in her eyes. "Not just from you, from us. They want to erase everything that makes us real. And if they succeed, this cabin will be nothing but empty wood." The fire cracked in the silence, the shadows long and restless. For the first time, the man felt the weight of the cabin pressing on him, not as protection, but as a fragile barrier holding something much darker at bay. And though he didn't want to admit it, he knew deep in his chest that she was right. Man could not sleep that night. The cabin felt alive, every creak of the wood sounding like a breath, every flicker of the fire casting shapes he did not trust. He sat in his chair with the rifle across his knees, his eyes locked on the door. But the woman did not seem afraid. She rested by the window, her face pale in the moonlight, watching the fog move through the forest as if she expected it to part at any moment. He tried to push away her words, tried to convince himself the knocks had been nothing more than hunters, or a trick of his tired mind. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. The silence that followed had not been natural. The forest had gone still, as if it was holding its breath. The memory, the one that had slipped into his mind earlier, still clawed at him. A hand beside his, face just out of reach. At dawn, he confronted her. "I want the truth," he said firmly, his voice hoarse from a night without. "Sleep. No more riddles. No more whispers. You say I've forgotten? You say we built this place together. Then tell me everything." She turned from the window slowly, her eyes searching his face, as if weighing whether he was ready. Then she spoke.
"Hey, years ago, before the erasing, we found this forest. Not by chance."
"We were running. Running from what?" he demanded. "From them," she said simply. "The ones who knocked. The ones who take what they want and leave nothing behind. They were hunting us because of what we carried. Not weapons, not gold, something far more dangerous. Memory, the kind they couldn't control." His chest tightened. "You're saying they erased me because—" "I remembered something." She nodded. "Because you remembered me. Because you remembered us." That was enough to threaten them. He wanted to laugh, wanted to shove her words away. But as she spoke, the cabin itself seemed to shift. The air grew heavy, and the walls seemed to hum faintly, as if agreeing with her. She stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "The scar you carry, the dreams you never understood. Way you came to this forest and never knew why. They left fragments in you because they couldn't take everything. This place was too strong to erase completely. That's why you feel the pull. That's why I'm here." His breath shook. "Why don't I remember your name? Then, if what you say is true, why can't I even speak it?" Her face softened with pain, because that was the first thing they took. Names are anchors. Without them, everything else drifts. They thought, if they cut my name from you, I would fade completely. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly. "But I didn't, because you refused to let me go," he stared at her, torn between fury and a strange ache deep inside his chest. Part of him wanted to shout that she was lying, that this was all madness. But another part, the part that had seen flashes in the glowing wood, that had heard the whispers in the storm, told him she was right. That night, when the fire burned low, he dreamed again. Only this time, the dream was not broken flashes. He saw himself in the forest, building walls with his bare hands. He saw her beside him, lifting beams, her face clear for the first time. And he felt the warmth of her hand in his, steady and sure. When he woke, his cheeks were wet, though he did not remember crying. He sat up in the silence, staring at the woman as she slept in the chair by the window. She looked so certain, so calm, as if she had always belonged here. For the first time, he did not feel the urge to throw her out. He felt something else's fear. Not of her, but of what losing her again might mean. The following day, as he gathered wood outside, the forest stirred once more. He froze when he saw them shapes moving in the fog, tall and pale. Their forms shifting like smoke, but their footsteps heavy on the earth. They moved slowly, circling the cabin, never stepping too close. Watching, he hurried back inside, slamming the door shut. His hands shook as he dropped the wood. "They're out there," he whispered. She opened her eyes, calm as ever. No, his heart raced. "Why aren't you afraid?" "'Cause they've always been out there," she said softly. "And because fear is what feeds them. But as long as we stand together, they can't take what we are." Her words burned in his chest. Together, the word felt heavy, both comforting and terrifying. He sat by the fire, rifle clutched tight, the fog pressing against the windows. For the first time, he realized this was no longer just about protecting a cabin. It was about protecting the truth of who he had been, and perhaps who he still was. The fog never lifted that day, thickened around the cabin until even the trees just beyond the porch were hidden. The man felt trapped, the rifle never leaving his side as he paced from wall to wall, listening to the silence. But it was not true silence. Every so often, a faint scrape against the wood, a crack of a branch, with a low thrum in the air, reminded him that many somethings moved out there in the mist. The woman did not pace. She sat by the fire, her hands folded, her gaze steady. To the man, it seemed as if she had lived through this before, as if the siege of the cabin was not a surprise, but a memory repeating itself. He wanted to shout at her, to demand why she wasn't helping fortify the place, why she wasn't terrified like he was. Instead, he muttered, "They're testing us." She nodded once. "They're waiting for weakness. They want you to open the door, to let them in willingly. That's how they erase everything, by invitation." The man clenched his jaw. "They'll get no invitation from me." But even as he spoke, a sound rose from the fog, soft at first, then stronger. Voices, familiar voices. He stiffened. Voices were calling his name. His brother's voice, his mother's, his old friends, long gone. He knew it couldn't be real, and yet the sound pierced him so deeply his grip on the rifle weakened. He stumbled toward the door, heart pounding. The voices grew clearer, warmer. Memories surged, sitting with his family, laughter by a fire that was not this one. For a moment, he believed if he opened the door, it would be standing there waiting for him. The woman's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "Don't listen." He froze, his hand inches from the latch. She was on her feet now, her eyes fierce, her voice commanding. "They use what you miss. They shape themselves from your longing. If you open that door, you'll never close it again." The voices outside turned harsh, twisting into cruel laughter, then screams. Something slammed against the wall, hard enough to rattle the shelves. The cabin shuddered under the force. He stumbled back, heart racing as the wood groaned under. "Another strike. They can't get in unless you let them," the woman reminded him. Steady, but urgent. "Hold the line." The night stretched on like a war. The creatures circled the cabin, pounding the walls, scratching at the windows, filling the air with voices that shifted from pleading to mocking. Sometimes they sounded like children crying, sometimes like beasts growling, sometimes like his own voice begging him to surrender. Every strike made him doubt the cabin would hold. He did what he could, hammering boards across the windows, stacking wood by the door, checking the rifle again and again, though he knew bullets would not stop what stalked them. His body ached with exhaustion, but the woman's calm steadied him. She whispered words under her breath, strange rhythms that seemed to sink into the walls, making them hum faintly as though alive. Hours later, when his arms shook with fatigue, the sound outside shifted again. This time, a single voice rose from the fog. Clear, familiar, his own. "Let me in," it called, perfectly mimicking his tone. "I'm cold. I'm tired. Please." His stomach dropped. The voice outside continued, mocking his desperation, repeating his every breath, every hesitation. He pressed his back against the door, sweat cold on his neck. The woman came to his side, her hand gripping his shoulder. They will break you from within if they can't break these walls, she warned. That is their siege, not to kill you, to hollow you. The voice outside screamed suddenly, a sound so sharp it rattled the glass in the windows. Then came silence, pure, heavy silence, the kind that made his ears ring. He almost wished for the pounding to return. Finally dawn broke through the fog, thin light seeping between the cracks of the boarded windows. When he dared peek outside, the forest was empty. No figures, no shadows, just trees stretching endlessly into the mist. His knees nearly gave out. He slumped against the wall, the rifle slipping from his hands. "We survived," he whispered. Not sure he believed it. The woman knelt beside him, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. This was only the beginning. They will return stronger. They know now you resist. Swallowed hard, dread knotting in his chest. Then what do we do? She looked toward the forest, her gaze distant. We prepare and we remember, because memory is what they fear most. And your memory, though broken, still carries the key to ending this. Her words chilled him. He wanted answers, but part of him already knew what she meant. His dreams, his scars, the flashes of her face in the past, all of it pointed toward something he had lost but was never meant to forget. As the light grew stronger, he realized the truth. The siege had not ended. It had only shifted. The true battle was no longer outside the cabin. It was inside him. The morning after the siege was quiet, too quiet. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something. The man had not slept. His body ached, and his mind throbbed with the weight of confusion and fear. He sat by the fire, staring at the flames, feeling as if the cabin itself was trembling deep in its bones. The woman stood near the door, her hand resting on the wood as if she could feel the heartbeat of the place. Her eyes were distant, heavy with the weight of secrets he still did not understand. Finally, she turned to him. "It will not stop," she said softly. "They will come again, stronger. They will not stop until you decide." He frowned, exhausted. "Decide what?" Her gaze cut deep into him. "Whether this cabin falls, or whether it stands forever. Because this place is more than walls. It is the anchor of your memory of who you truly are. You built it once with me to keep them out. But when you chose to forget, the walls weakened. Now, they press harder. They want to erase us both." He shook his head, anger mixing with dread. "Why me? Why this place?" "Because you are the one they fear," she said, her voice steady. "Your will keeps this cabin alive, and if they can hollow you, they will take not just this home, but everything beyond these woods. The forest is only the edge of them. If you break, the world breaks." The words hung heavy in the air. He felt the truth in them, even if his mind resisted. All the strange flashes of memory, all the whispers of her voice in dreams, all the scars he could never explain, they all pointed to something he had chosen not to face. Before he could answer, the fog thickened again. The air outside grew heavy, and the cabin walls creaked under an unseen pressure. This time there was no scratching, no voices calling. Instead, a deep, endless rumble rolled through the ground as though the earth itself was growling. The woman's eyes widened, and for the first time fear cracked her calm. "They are coming themselves," she whispered. "The ones behind the shadows, the true erasers." The man gripped the rifle, though he knew it was useless. His heart hammered as the windows went black, not from fog, but from something pressing against them, smothering the light. The fire flickered weakly, choking as if air was being stolen from the room. The cabin groaned like it might collapse. "Tell me what to do," he shouted. She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the center of the cabin. "Remember," she said, her voice fierce, "not with your mind, with your soul. Look at me. Do not let go." The shadows pressed harder, seeping through the cracks, filling the air with whispers that clawed at his thoughts. They spoke in his own voice, in hers, in voices of people he loved, twisting every memory into something bitter. They told him she was lying, that she was the invader, that he should cast her out and be free. The cabin shuddered as the roof began to crack. He closed his eyes, clutching her hand. At first, there was only darkness. But then, faintly, memories began to rise, building the cabin together, laughing as they carried beams of wood, whispering to each other as they lit the first fire, promising that this place would be theirs forever. The memories came not as pictures, but as feelings: warmth, trust, belonging. And with each memory, the walls of the cabin steadied, the cracks closing, the whispers growing weaker. The shadows shrieked, slamming against the walls with fury. The man cried out as pain burned through his skull, but he held on tighter to her hand. The woman's voice rose, chanting strange words that hummed through the air, weaving with his memories. Together, their voices filled the cabin, and light began to seep through the cracks. Pushing back the blackness, the floor shook, the walls trembled, and then, in one final surge, the cabin erupted with blinding light. The shadows screamed, dissolving into smoke, vanishing into the void. The fog outside burned away, revealing clear sky and endless forest bathed in dawn. The cabin stood tall, its walls glowing faintly, as though alive with their shared strength. Silence followed, the heavy silence of fear, but a calm, gentle stillness. The man collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his body trembling. What? Woman knelt beside him, brushing her hand across his face with a tired smile. You remembered, she whispered. That is what saves us. Looked at her, the fragments of memory still glowing in his mind. You were always here, he said slowly, realization dawning. This was always ours. She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. And now you know. The cabin will stand, as long as we stand together. Outside, the forest was quiet again, but not empty. It watched as it always had, where in its depths, the shadows still lingered, waiting for another chance. But for now, they had been driven back. For now, the cabin was safe. The man rose slowly, his hand still holding hers. He looked around the room, every corner now alive with warmth. For the first time, he did not feel alone. But he also knew the battle was not over. It never would be. The shadows would return, testing, pressing, waiting for weakness. And when they did, he and the woman would be ready. Together, they stepped to the window, looking out into the vast forest. The man felt the weight of the truth, the burden of memory, and the strength of their bond. Whatever came, they would face it side by side, and the cabin, their cabin, would endure.